first question is, what are you most proud of in your career to this point?
Well, I think some of the things that I'm most proud of is through my work, really putting children first. And in everything that I did in my prior district, and as I continued to move forward in my career here in Norwalk, is really thinking about what are the best things that we need to do as an organization to ensure that students are successful and do well. In my prior district, that was always at the forefront of my work, and I'm looking forward for it to continue to be at the forefront of what I do here.
Can you point to something specific where you feel like you accomplished that?
Well, for instance, in the district that I came from, it was a district that was under corrective action by the state, and we moved the district to good standing by putting a strong emphasis in literacy and mathematics and ensuring that students were receiving the adequate support regardless of where they came in terms of their linguistic skills to ensure that they succeeded in school. And as a result of that, we moved a lot of schools that were in need of improvement to good standing, and as the district at large, we also accomplished the same.
Okay. So that's seemingly the equivalent of closing the achievement gap.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And by increasing academic success for students, that's one of the ways we close the opportunity gap for students.
Okay. So this is your first experience being a superintendent?
This is my second.
Your second, okay. Well, what's it like coming here during a pandemic? And, you know, it's tough enough to come to a new place, but the situation is just weird. So what's that like?
Well, in a normal situation, we would be having a lot of opportunities to engage people in person and have dialogue with members of the community face-to-face. I think that has been one of the biggest challenges, but one of the greatest assets, because although I haven't been able to engage people on a face-to-face basis, I was able to have the opportunity to interface with many, many more people than I would have been able to if I was setting in-person conversations. So having Zoom and Teams as a platform to start engaging in dialogue with the community allowed me a bigger scope, a bigger opportunity to have a larger scope of individuals to talk to learn from, to hear about what has happened in Norwalk in the past, what continues to need to improve, as well as what are some of the big accomplishments that have happened that we need to continue to fulfill as we move forward. I think with COVID, it has created the challenge of having to rethink what school looks like, having to prioritize very specific elements of safety and well-being that we might have not thought about before. So the way we looked at school reopening was very different than what we would have in normal circumstances. Even with the current listening and learning tour, we were sitting actually here today with Dr. Fergus, mapping out the final details of what it would look like and having to think through how to engage in these conversations in spaces that are adequately socially distanced, but also providing those individuals that want to participate with an option to do it via a digital platform. Were things that we had to think through that in a normal circumstance we wouldn't probably have to strategize and problem solve around.
That's interesting. So the feedback you got from the community, like hurdles that have been overcome or challenges, what can you say about that feedback?
So far, one of the things that I've heard is the need for more communication, more transparency, the desire to continue to move in the positive path of being the best city school system in Connecticut, and looking at what we need to do next to ensure that continues. Having conversations about the work that was accomplished through the strategic operating plan and the things that we need to continue to do to ensure that what has been done continues and what needs to continue to be further developed is mapped out as we think through the new strategic operating plan that we're hoping to complete, hopefully at some point between January and February of this academic school year.
Okay. You mentioned that Zoom has its benefits. Do you think that using Zoom will continue after, let's say, hopefully that this coronavirus situation goes away?
So I think using these different digital platforms has allowed people the opportunity to interface in a different way and more frequently. So I think that even after COVID, we're transitioning from Zoom to Teams. We will continue to utilize these platforms to engage in conversation. One, it minimizes people having to spend time moving to different places. It affords the opportunity to have quick conversations. And I think that that's something that we're learning, creates the opportunity for time efficiency and also the opportunity to have dialogue, more dialogue than we probably had in the past in a quick, expedited way that face-to-face might not necessarily allow.
Yeah, okay. So what's a typical day like for you?
There's no typical day. So I think my mornings initially started off visiting a school. So my goal in the summer was to visit every single school and have an opportunity to kind of meet the principals, learn from them, their experiences, who they are as people, what are their aspirations for their schools, and what are the things that they would advise me as a superintendent in wanting to, for me to continue to do, or things that I need to keep in mind as I continue to transition into the role. So today I actually concluded my last visit with one of the principals in having this in-depth conversation with them of getting to know them. And so that would start my morning most of the time. And then the day would encompass, depending on the day, like Monday we have cabinet, we have conversations around practices and things that we need to work on. A lot of initially those conversations were COVID related and reopening. Depending on the day, I could have a task force conversation with a group of parents and staff to talk about reopening and the progress we're making towards reopening, or meeting with different personnel in the team, visiting different sites, having conversations with community partners. So there's an array of things that would encompass my day, usually ending pretty late, around 7, and continuing even after I get home, following up with conversations with either board members or different personnel that would want to touch base on different matters throughout the day.
Okay, so you're working hard, you're putting in a lot of hours, right?
All the time.
Yeah. When do
And
you
last week I was in every single school for reopening because I wanted to get a sense of how people were feeling, how the kids were feeling. I had an opportunity to speak to the students, get their perspective around reopening. And it was really great to just hear children excited about seeing their friends, being back in school, the challenges of wearing a mask, which is one of the things that they spoke about. But despite that, being happy that they were able to see their peers and have conversations, not on a screen.
Yeah. Did they manage to keep a social distance from each other, or is it like spontaneous hugging?
No, they were socially distanced.
Oh, wow.
Even in the cafeteria, everybody was spread out 6 feet apart. I think especially at the high school, the principals did a great job of setting up a cafe-style structure that ensured that kids would be able to socially distance, but also have the opportunity to engage with one another.
Okay. Well, how did the school reopening go?
So for overall, I think school reopening went very well. Teachers were working with the technology, experimenting new ways of utilizing the technology and learning how to engage students in a different medium. We did have glitches, like any other start of the school year, people getting used to the new tools and how to interface in the new tools. But every day that I went to a school and school progressed, I heard people feeling more comfortable utilizing the technology and acclimating into the new normal of synchronous instruction.
Yeah, I have no experience as a teacher, but I think that must be very odd. You have kids in 2 rooms and kids at home, and very difficult to handle.
It's different, but I also saw like really interesting things. Like I saw in one classroom a child at home through Google Meets, and a child in person having lunch together, having a conversation.
That's cute.
So, although it might not be the easiest thing to do because people are not accustomed to it, the more that they have been acclimating and settling in and learning about the best ways of using the tools, the more seamless it's becoming for people. Not saying that it's easy, but day by day it becomes more comfortable for them to immerse themselves in the work.
Okay. So what surprised you about the school district once you got here and became involved and immersed in it?
I don't think there was anything that I was surprised by, because before I came, I was able to do a lot of research about the work that had been done.
Okay.
I guess I was pleasantly, I don't think surprised is the word, but it was pleasant to see how Norwalkers are very community oriented, are very willing to receive people with open arms. Everybody that I've engaged with always talks about what can we do to help, how can we work collaboratively to ensure that the district works, things work well. So I was happy to see that people are able and willing to support the educational system to ensure that children are successful. And it doesn't matter who I speak to, there's always this pride to be part of Norwalk and to ensure that Norwalk does the best it can to ensure that children are well.
That's cool. I think you mentioned Tuesday night you impressed at how dedicated every teacher is.
Absolutely. I haven't visited a single classroom where I didn't see teachers fully engaged and committed to the work. Not only teachers, but paraeducators. When I walk into the main office, the commitment that secretaries and support personnel have in making people feel welcome and supported, and seeing as parents arrive, the process that principals have organized. I was at Marvin and I started to greet children and open doors as they were coming in, and just watching how people are in a very collaborative nature, making sure that children are well served and treated as they arrived and welcomed into the school.
Okay. I heard something about the courtyard at Norwalk High School being open, even though that had been said for years that couldn't be done, that there was something about the ventilation and maybe ADA access. And also that there's extended recess at West Rocks Middle School, which is another topic that was said that couldn't happen. Is that true?
So there are areas that were opened so that children can have lunch in open areas that allowed for social distancing. And some of these courtyards, because of safety reasons, were not being utilized. So one of the things that we did was add additional personnel during those times so that children had a space where they could have social conversations with their peers and also have their lunches.
Okay.
In terms of West Rock, I haven't heard that they have an
Okay.
extended recess. Based on the program that we have in central office, they have recess like every other school within the time frame that has been designated within the program.
Oh, okay. So this courtyard accessibility, that's just related to COVID? Once we get back to normal, maybe they won't be using it so much?
Probably, well, after we are able to utilize the cafeteria without having to socially distance students, we won't be utilizing that. So it's
Okay.
a COVID remedy until we go back to our previous normal.
So what brought Dr. Fergus to Norwalk Public Schools? How did that happen?
So we were in conversation with different philanthropists around looking at ways in which we could have the listening and learning tour in a way that we also looked at equity and utilizing that lens as we immerse ourselves in learning about the district and what the community wanted. And Dr. Fergus has expertise in that work, so we partnered with him in Temple University to support the listening and learning tour and also support the work of building the capacity of the district around understanding disproportionalities that might be currently existing within our school system, as well as build the capacity of personnel around implicit bias.
Okay. He worked with you previously?
He worked with my district previously in doing similar work around building an equity lens and looking at disproportionality
Okay.
across the district, as well as supporting the leadership in defining goals to ensure that all students were well served within the system.
Okay. Do you think there's implicit bias in all public schools? Do you think there's racism?
I mean, any institution has the potential of having systematic racism. And part of what we're doing is assessing where we are as an organization and what is the training that we need to have as an organization to ensure that everybody that's working for the betterment of children has an understanding of how our own biases can impact the way we engage in the work and how we can develop practices that ensure that all children are successful. When you look at the historical data across the country, there's obviously significant concern of how Black children are over-disciplined and how certain populations of students, Black and Hispanic, are not achieving at the level that we want them to. And we need to assess how our system might be contributing to those outcomes and ensure that we set up a deeper understanding around people's mindset and structures that might be contributing to that, so that we can ensure that as we design our new strategic operating plan, we set up supports to ensure that all students are successful within our system.
Well, it's early, but how is that effort going?
So right now, we are in the midst of planning out the listening and learning conversations, and by next week, we will be putting out the first part, which is a survey to get people's impressions of where we are as an organization. And principals had their first training back in August during the principal retreat. As you know, the board had their first session in the summer during the board retreat. So we are starting off by building the capacity and building a common language and understanding of what implicit bias is, what does it mean, and how do we as individuals contribute to the larger system around some of these challenges, and what are the things that we can do to ensure that if we have certain patterns or dynamic that might be might be creating outcomes that are not favorable to some students, that we can engage in course adjustment and ensure that all students succeed by implementing structures that make that possible.
Okay. Do you think the school district has been too focused on test results?
So I couldn't answer that because I haven't been here long enough to assess if that has been the pattern.
Okay.
I believe that we want to focus on looking at the whole child and look at what success looks like, looking at assessments, but looking beyond assessments as well, because children are more than numbers, and we want to ensure that when we see or determine what success looks like, that it encompasses many more things than just state assessments.
Okay, so subjective interpretations of
I don't know if
impressions of,
subjective, but they're
Okay.
qualitative measures also that we can utilize
okay,
to assess how we are progressing over time, especially when we look at SEL parameters and how students are progressing in terms of their social-emotional aptitude and how they're expressing themselves, looking at restorative practices as another means of supporting students and their work, and utilizing some of those parameters to measure our success as well.
okay. Is that a tricky balance? You don't want to have test results that are less outstanding than they've been, but you also need to focus this other stuff, and it sounds like you need more resources, really.
So everything is a balance, right? Not doing
Yeah.
too much of one, but I think that doing the different components will build on the thing that has already been happening in terms of achievement. I think a child that is socially, emotionally well is better able to perform, and if we support them in those components, their achievement will also progress. If a child is not well while they're in the classroom, and they can't concentrate because they're concerned about other things, we can provide them with all of the resources we want, and the likelihood of them doing well are less than if they feel happy, excited to be in the environment, and at the same time learning what they need to also achieve in whatever standardized assessments they are exposed to.
Okay. The English Language Learner Program has been praised. What's your assessment of the program?
I think that the district has moved in the right direction in establishing programs to serve what I call multilingual learners. And we will continue to strengthen those practices, given the large number of multilingual learners in the district. I think it's important for us to continue to expand that work to fulfill the need of a constantly growing population here in Norwalk.
Yes, it's a very diverse population. Yeah. What about the special education department? I think that's viewed as having improved quite a bit. What's your assessment?
So one of the things that we're going to be doing, we're in the process of getting an RSP to do a special education review for us to assess where the district is based on the work that has been done, and also learn what other things we need to continue to do to continue to strengthen the program. So a lot of work has been done and a lot of progress has been made. So this is a great opportunity for us to assess what needs to continue to be done so that we can continue to move that department in a good direction, which it already started.
Okay. Would CREC do that, or you going to just?
We're putting out the RFP, so we
Yeah.
wouldn't know yet until the
Okay.
RFP is complete.
You're working on a new strategic operating plan. How do you expect it to differ from the one that's been used for the last 5 years?
So, good question. We would probably have to wait until we acquire the findings from the study.
Okay.
So we will have the special education review, the listening and learning tour that we're engaging in through an equity lens. We also have the Connecticut School for Change, who's finalizing the review of the previous strategic operating plan. And the last component will be the facilities review, because it's been more than 5
Right,
years since the
right.
last one. So utilizing all of these components will give us a sense of what has been achieved and what needs to continue to be worked on based on the previous strategic operating plan, but things change over time, right? So
Yeah.
we've had an influx of multilingual learners into the district, and that has implications in the work that we do. When the original strategic operating plan was done, there was growth happening, but not at the level that it happened. If you remember last year, we had over 300-something students arrive, and that has implications in terms of how we think about the work moving forward. So within those 5 years, as people were building and developing the work for that strategic operating plan, things have also shifted in the district. So it's important for us to reassess. There will be probably elements of the previous strategic operating plan that we might continue, but from what we learn through qualitative and quantitative data, we will utilize that information to develop our new strategic operating plan.
Okay. Why do you prefer a multilingual learner?
Because saying English language learner doesn't value the fact that they have a language that they
Okay.
speak. And it creates a situation where English becomes the language of preference, when
Right,
both
okay.
languages are mutually as important.
Right, it kind of emphasizes the idea of the dominant culture.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Instead of valuing multilingualism.
Yeah, okay. Are your children attending MPS?
They are.
How are they doing?
They're loving it.
Yeah,
They're really happy. The boys are loving it.
that's cool. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you think you'd like to communicate?
Other than I'm really happy to be here, really enjoying being part of such an amazing community. I'm looking forward to embarking in great work with great people. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.